We were just talking before the recording began about the state of the internet nowadays, and I was remarking on the fact that I've never used TikTok at any point, and then found out that you actually do or have used it in the
Yeah.
past, which I was shocked and honestly quite disgusted by.
Yeah.
What's your take on the TikTok versus Instagram Reels question?
Well, I feel like there is certain algorithm and certain type of people on TikTok that are just different than Instagram. Instagram has become the space where it's so nice because people are so offensive and so like judgmental, and this is so refreshing to see online. Literally, on TikTok you're so protected, and the algorithm is made in a way that you literally just see the things you want to see. On Instagram, you will eventually find something that's like bad or different opinion. On TikTok, it can be such a like little chamber of ideas where you become like you can easily become degenerate or depressed or whatever, and that's why it makes actually more sense to me that they're banning it, but not so much. It's to just demonize it. I mean, the whole social media is a problem, of course, but not just TikTok, but I mean, I have used TikTok, but it's just for the business, actually, for my business, which is disclosed. No one knows about it.
Yeah, secret business.
Yeah,
I
secret
totally
business.
respect that.
Yeah.
I don't know much about how the content viewing process goes on with TikTok. All I know is that the fact that it's had such a huge effect on everything. What's really fascinating about Instagram is exactly what you just mentioned, which is the Instagram comment section, and also how that incentivizes content to be created on the platform and shared, where you're going to be scrolling down your For You page and you're going to get stuff that, for example, some kind of disabled person, and the only reason it's being shown to you, the only reason is because of the comment section. And it's like the people who engage with those posts are the people like you, and therefore you'll get shown this content. What I found really interesting is that there's a lot of machine learning that's going on there. There's a lot of sort of quite innovative technology. What happened to Instagram in the early days of sort of the AI wave that we've been seeing in the last 2 years is they did this kind of more batching style of machine learning, where basically what they would do is they would learn from an entire streak of behavior that you had. So they would look at, you scrolled down these reels and you did 50 reels, and in that time you did these things, and we're going to learn from that. TikTok actually grew, in terms of its content engagement, because they actually did that on a case-by-case basis. So every reel you looked at would inform the algorithm on how the content is being suggested. And actually, Instagram switched to that back-end model about 1.5 years ago. And what quickly occurred, and I'm sure you've noticed this, is just you've got this incredible tailoring that Instagram has towards your interests and behaviors, which I find fascinating, because what it has allowed is, I was very frustrated with Instagram a couple of years ago, as this wave of posting that we were all doing was kind of dying, in terms of how much it reached people and how much more these reels were reaching people. I was frustrated because I would go on these reels and I would just hate them so much, and they were not engaged, they were not interesting to me. They introduced a feature which is where you could ban words, and that was really powerful. I just banned an extraordinary number of words, and it just made my life a lot better. But then they did this batch technology, which basically means that when you go on Instagram, and if you reward certain types of interests that you have, and you basically scroll past things that you aren't interested in, it does really pick up on that.
I noticed as well.
And as much as I kind of resent the fact that now if you want to play the game of Instagram, you really need to be playing the Reels game, and it's not only the Reels game, but the attention-seeking optimized, dopamine optimized Reels game. I do like using it as a consumer, not in terms of like, I'm going to sit down and spend 2 hours on this, but I quite enjoy that you do get some really good content, especially if you're interested in certain topics. For example, I'm a drummer, as I've sort of mentioned before. I get loads of very, very interesting drumming content, which kind of opens my horizons slightly, because the machine learning is so nailed down.
Yeah, and it happens literally so quickly as well. Like I will be interested in something, search it or look through some reels. Next hour, it's all just that. It's not anymore that you get so much of recommended stuff from like general public, which I love. But at the same time, it's kind of bad because you kind of lose touch of what's going on in the world. Like it used to be like, oh, this is going on, this is popular, and now you're like, have you seen this thing? And you're like, and they're like, what are you talking about? That's such a niche thing, like a meme, like no one knows what you're talking about. So that's kind of what I don't like, but it's also great because the social media is finally personalized, and you don't have to like be, I guess, a normie or this part of a global movement, which is great, Like, oh my God, did you see this new series on Netflix? No, I haven't heard about it, and I love it because I've just been watching drumming videos, So
That's so
amazing.
good. That's exactly my experience.
Yeah.
I'm, as both of us are, very, we're Zoomers ultimately, and personally, I'm actually a huge advocate of these echo chambers. I've always been one.
Yeah.
In Instagram, as you were speaking about earlier with me, I'm following like 38 people now, because I believe in extremely limited batching focus on people who you approve of and like, and having a very small network. And I also believe the same about the way that you consume content. If you really hone in on the things that you are actually interested in, and you actually cut out the rest of the world, and you stay completely oblivious to so many other things that are going on day to day, I find that it can be so fun. And I actually find it quite funny when you are known as the guy. Maybe you're at work, maybe you're just in the life, and you're known as the guy that
Out
has
of touch,
no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But then you have actual real knowledge, which is completely different from that. What happened in the sport last week, I have absolutely no idea. But I do know a fair number of things about what's going on today. And I also know a fair number of things about the real world.
No, absolutely. Like, people also get like offended when you're actually not like participating in those things. Like, how do you mean you're not following it? You are uninformed. You're like a caveman. You need to know these things. Why do you need to know these things? Like, so for example, some big event happened, tragic event. Okay, it's horrible. Have you done anything to change the situation, to help it? No. Okay, it is objectively horrible, we know that. But there's nothing I can do. There's nothing that information will make me like better or something like that. It's just gonna upset me or whatever. It is not, why? Just why? There's so many greater things to focus on. And a lot of people, a lot of people actually accuse me in real life to be like, oh my God, Maro, you're not empathic. You just care about yourself. But the same argument is again like, of course I care about those people, but why would? But the unfortunate situation in the world is that people are constantly dying. There's horrible illnesses, there are horrible things. Am I able to actively do something about it? Not really, So why do I need to fill my mind constantly with black pills? People always ask how to get white pill, whatever, Well, you first need to stop consuming so many black pills because essentially they're always going to be happening, and you can just put your effort into good things. Very simple.
I would so much rather live in a cave than in what is today the internet. Whereas essentially it's an outrage machine where the entire machine is organized to, basically inspire every emotion of pain, anger, and frustration.
Yeah, that's what gets clicks
towards you, and for you to not necessarily act, but to talk and to speak more. And there are so many things that happen in the world, and the internet is not there to solve those issues. It's not even there to engage with those issues. It's there to amplify conversation around those issues. And what happens is you just get decades of nothing happening, but people complaining about things. So many global conflicts going on right now as well.
And exactly what you said about the word amplify. It really makes those problems seem as that's the only thing that's going on in the world, and oftentimes just makes it so much bigger. And you think, oh my God, there's so much, I don't know, hate or crime or whatever, but those things get so, like zoomed in, it gets so blown out of proportion that you think the world is freaked, the world is so bad, but when it's actually just the small minority of things that are going on, and so many good things are constantly going on, but people have no need to talk about it because they're not on internet all the time. Very simple.
I completely agree with that. So I would say that when it comes to the way that the internet's going, I do like this kind of ability that you have now with machine learning, essentially to teach your machine, your computer, to do what you want and to show you content that you like and engage with and enjoy. And as much as it's there is a certain sort of dose of cancer that you're getting when you go on Reels or whatever it happens to be, TikTok. I think if you have a healthy relationship with your phone, and you also have things that you're doing in your life. I actually don't mind it. I actually think it's quite fun. Like I'm sharing things all day to people. I'm also receiving a lot of things, which I just find absolutely hilarious. And when I go on Instagram, a lot of the time I'm laughing. As much as it is like, you could say, there's been a narrative about social media around for literally ever since it was founded that it's destroying people's lives, it's wasting all your time.
Yeah.
Like when I look at my Instagram hours compared to what they used to be when I was aggressively making content, I'm actually spending like a fraction of the time on Instagram than I used to. And I'm in the real world a lot more.
Yeah.
And I'm replying to DMs, I'm occasionally posting a story, but honestly, I think that is a relatively healthy relationship with social media. And I think that what we have today is I'm actually fairly optimistic about. I don't mind too much, though it does get into a bit of a quandary, which is, how do you create content in this age? And I think you're more qualified to answer that question than I am.
Yeah.
I'm not a kind of short form video kind of guy. I was a written post kind of guy, and that's limited me for sure.
Yeah. So the previous point you made, like social media now, it's rare that we actually can talk about it more positively. Of just years of talking about negative things about it, whilst constantly using it, which is funny. Well, now it's finally getting to a point where first thing you said is if you're actually busy, you'll naturally just use it less, and that's one of the problems that we constantly have in all kinds of like addictions, and that is to actually start doing something good, and naturally you'll start doing something that's bad less. It just happens naturally. Obviously if you can prevent it completely it's great, but it's the same thing with everything. Like people say, I'm locked up my sweets, to stop eating them. If you actually just start eating better food, you'll be less likely to eat that sweet food. Same thing with social media, same thing with anything. Like you cannot limit something just because you lack self-discipline. It's just a ridiculous thing to do. And like you said, now it can be used as such a good socializing and useful tool, even if it's just for memes, or even if it's like something you're actually interested in. For example, on my business page, all I have is freaking Soviet era lifting videos, wrestler stuff. I go on there and actually pick up some things. I actually write them down to try out on my own, which never happened like in years since I use social media. So it's been good. But what you said about short-term and long-term content, I don't know. It's kind of the previous year, and especially like 23, it was so bad with the short-term, type of content. But you can see people like Sam Sulek. You can see people like doing like those long like building videos. You can see that they're slowly getting more views. I mean, I think the Sam Sulek guy, he was I think one of the most viewed channels on fitness in the previous year. Like maxed out all the views and likes. And all his videos are like minimum 30 minutes long. So you can see kind of the people are just tired of brain rot, and they actually want to enjoy something for longer, just as you would a movie, just as you would like any longer piece of content. So I feel like not necessarily that you need to adapt, that you need to be just very consistent with the message, putting it all the time out there, and using short-term content, shorter like the short style, maybe just like a little clips, just so people can actually get to watch your stuff. But basing your content of making it to appeal to the like immediately you will actually watch it, I think is just like soul crushing, and you will not enjoy your work anymore. So I feel like it's just about really, if you're good and you're consistent, people will start to catch on. If you're not good and you make like clickbait content, yeah, people will click on, but they will not stay. You'll be just like a little trend, and people will go away because they will notice you don't have anything of value. You just are making content that's like clickable. So I feel like at the end we win. That's very simple.
Yeah, and you bring up YouTube and the biggest YouTubers in fitness, etc. I'm actually of the belief that YouTube has always been a bit of a golden gem in the kind of social media scene, where because you don't get this mass engagement and mass content creation, you get people who really put their time and effort into creating content, and also because you have this incredible YouTube search algorithm where you go on the For You page or the home page, it just gives you this absolutely like insane stuff.
Yeah, they really dialed it in.
The perspectives of a Mongolian horseman in 700.
Yeah, freak yeah! I'm gonna watch this. Yeah, let's go.
And I think that kind of that kind of content where you are, somebody's really putting their time into it, and it's also tends to be a bit longer form. At least you're talking about a minimum of sort of 5 to 10 minutes for those videos, but you can easily go on longer. It's just incredible, and I do love YouTube, and I'm not so sure about YouTube Shorts. It's not something I really enjoy compared to, for example, Instagram Reels, which I think is a different thing. If you're going to come into the short form content arena, I'm going to choose Instagram Reels. But then again, YouTube, the actual platform, the subscription, you can subscribe to specific people who you enjoy watching. I listen to a lot of stuff around investing, which we probably won't get into today, but it's a big sort of personal passion of mine to get into investing and to, build a portfolio in the stock market and, have try and increase net worth, etc. And the amount of content you get on there, which, in terms of like the good people, is just absolutely insane. Yes, we're talking about sort of university level people or even hedge fund level people, just literally getting on their, microphone and talking, and you can selectively either watch those videos or, this is something that I've found as an incredible power, is to just listen to videos, walk around shores, even train and listen to people talking about stuff on the internet. And if you need to have a notebook or anything or take notes, you can always do that. But if I'm cooking or I'm doing something passive and listening to a video, I can just absorb information and knowledge all the time. And I just find that extremely powerful. And something I've always been optimistic about is YouTube. Ever since I was sort of 8 or 7, I started using YouTube.
No, man, I imagined myself as a YouTuber, man. I was like, this is the job of the future,
I've been a massive user of YouTube.
Yeah.
Literally every year, all the years since. And it's been a big part of my life. And it's also really been important for my intellectual development as well. And obviously that's comparing that to Instagram. Instagram has been, in terms of what we've done on Instagram, has been a huge portion of my intellectual development. I don't know if those reels are. What I do think they are sort of like you said, kind of like tasters for content. They're kind of like, bringing you ideas or tips or things like that, especially if you're using it selectively, which I think has its place. But also comedy, actually having fun with your life and enjoying it, and having good memes and jokes, it is fun as well. I found, the page that I built and the community we were built around was not just purely about self-improvement. It was also about literally having fun at being a guy in your 20s and living life,
No, absolutely. And I mean, I told you, I think today or yesterday, that I literally, all my English is because of YouTube. Like, you cannot deny it, how powerful it is. Even if I'm just using it, not even needing to like specifically search for something, you will eventually find something good on YouTube. It's just a good platform in general. But what you were saying about Instagram and our community that we built, like a lot of the things were just like, even now, I mean, it's such a meme, with the white monster and stuff like that, but it's still getting people to lift, to eat like relatively healthy, and it's in a fun way. You're not even thinking about it as if, I actually need to start my workout routine, I need to do this. You're thinking of like, every bro is doing it, I want to go with my bro to the gym, do a nice session, hit chest, whatever. It became such a thing, and all the things that we worked really hard to share, it kind of became a normie thing, which is not bad at all. Like, I never hate when things like that become like a trend, because even though something's watered down, it comes from nice, like positive principles. Like, there is good and bad, and even though those people actually don't realize that what they're doing is good, it's feeding the good message. It's getting the good message across. There's like, obviously there's looks maxing now, people chewing mastic gum, which like mastic gum was literally like a secret like 4 years ago. Everyone was like, what is that? What are you chewing now? And everyone now knows about it. There's this thing that can get really like superficial. It can really get like loses the message, but it is 10 times better than people like, getting into gaming too much, or into like these things that aren't linked to the better things, So I feel like, honestly, the social media is at the best place it has been in like 15 years, like literally.
Fascinating, isn't it? Because there was a time when all the things that we knew were secrets, and we played a part in making those things popular. Ultimately, mastic gum, really did directly come from
Solar
people like
community,
us on the internet. This whole winter arc thing, which I kind of resent because I'm going to the gym now and all these like Zoomers have tripods. We were talking about that as well. They've got tripods doing their like 20 kilo deadlifts. It's absolutely frustrating.
Yeah.
And
you just gotta lock in.
and also the my protein thing, like everyone is just drinking this protein powder and like they stink nowadays because of how just digestive. Anyway, I don't want to get into that much. The gyms just become quite cursed like that if you get too many Zoomers and millennials around. But at the same time, I'm never one to resent the things that we were popularizing becoming popular. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
And I do think that when you go out to the world today, you're right. Like, it is an objectively good thing that more people are training. And what they would have done otherwise is, as you said, gaming. It would have been nothing, essentially. And, we do have a group of people who are actually sort of growing in their life. And I think it's quite good that our generation is defined by things like fitness and things like, fitness is actually a key tenet and also being based online, I guess, rather than many of the other generations before us who are defined by content, things that they've watched in movies, etc. It's a good thing. Whether we continue to harness that or not, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, does it? But yeah, I've got a positive view of the world, and I think it's good to start this on a positive note with social media. I don't mind it. I think it's okay. I actually quite like Reels. And I quite like where Instagram's gone. But then I do ask the question, like, where am I playing in that? To some extent, just making posts, as always has been the case, is not a bad thing. Is it? Yeah, interesting.
No, absolutely. Like, but it's still like we're talking these positives. But if you are not focused on anything in life and you just think you're actually improving by watching content on things that interest you, you're actually like just literally wasting time. You're better off staring at the wall if you're not like actively pursuing something, because there's a trap that so many people fall into where they watch content, especially about self-improvement, especially about bettering yourself, and you absorb 10 videos, or not absorb, you ingest 10 videos, but you don't actually do anything with that. You just shit it out because you are not doing anything with your life. You're literally in your bed watching those videos, maybe going to gym, and then sleeping again, just doing your whole life, and you think you're improving. You might think that you are better than others. You might start developing this syndrome that, I know these things, normies don't know these things, but you're just literally not doing anything. That is a very, very big trap that many people, like young people, fall into, we talked about this today. Like, you will improve so much more or learn so much more things in real life than doing stuff, just living, just talking to people, putting yourself in those normal situations, than just digesting content. But if you do those things and also learn a bit or have fun, you are then using the social media to full advantage. And one thing that we haven't even touched upon is literally we are right here at my place and we met through freaking social media, through Instagram, so many good connections. And even though I don't think we all, I wanted to say we failed, but we never failed. We just kind of, the era moved on. We did our work. I think we did, like, I guess, ingrain our message to some people, when they continue living with it. But the best thing that came out of all of this is the connections, the friendships. Some of my best people in life, some of my best friends are literally the people I met through this page, through online. Like, most of my best friends are now through online communities, which is incredible. Just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you can, as a content creator, you could basically fly to most countries on Earth and there'll be someone who follows you who not only would be able to meet you there, but in many cases I've found that I can stay with people, or as is now the case. But do all kinds of things. Meet people, but also have them show you the world, and but also likewise for us to bring value to people on a constant basis. It has been a really strong and impressive thing about the world that we're in, and it's been something I've actually been more focused on in the last 2 years since I was really aggressively posting. Nowadays it's saying, well, I have this network of a good 20,000 people or so. What does that actually mean? Is it the population of that those people? Where are they? Like, how can I meet them? It seems like a lot of people are in America, and that's always been a frustration. I do a lot, in my job, I do a lot of work with America, and that might be something I can sort of can't harness, capture in the future. But for now, being in the UK, I've met some really great people. Gone camping with people in the spheres. I've done all kinds of stuff. I've traveled around the UK for this stuff, and also worked with people who I've met on Instagram. Done all kinds of fascinating things with this time, and that is a huge part of the Instagram sphere that we've built. It's that it's real people, and that we are all real, and you can really capture and harness that. You can really do amazing things.
Yeah, especially because when we actually did meet, not just us, but all the people we met, it is just pure real life. It's not about let's collab and make content. It's actually just the way the community was built. It was built on just doing things in real life. So obviously you're gonna do things in real life when you meet, not just talk about it online as we are doing right now. But no, it was incredible, and I think this goes well with the question we had about having friendships, having communities and stuff like that. I mean, because this is one of the, in my life, one of the best like ways I managed to find such good friends, because I'm from a small town, whatever, people are into bad things, so I feel like social media and having being surrounded by content and people who are based on doing things in real life, or just based, nothing else, is one of the, in my opinion, one of the better ways today to find very good friendships. So yeah, I wonder what you have to say about this, especially because you have more experience, kind of like, I guess, leading communities and establishing good friendships.
Yeah. So I'm gonna find that question. It's just here. It's how do you create or become part of a community? That's the question. I mean, communities are something that I've been quite challenged by in some ways over the years, because in a good way, it's a challenge that you would get your teeth into, because I found that I had always met people who were maybe on the same wavelength. I could say certain words around them. I could, if you know what I mean, you could go to the pub in the UK. Going to the pub, even if you don't drink, is an integral part of life. And you could make a lot of jokes with those people, and you could be on the same wavelength. And those people have showed up when I grew up in my hometown. They've shown up in my schools that I've been to afterwards, university, and they've also shown up in work, and they've shown up in other spheres as well, like friends that I made who are through other friends. So I've always been surrounded by people who are good quality people who I like. But what's one massive frustration about Instagram, and something that I found out very quickly, is the geography aspect. We spoke about this a couple of days ago as well. Is this idea that when you select for purity of ideas, and not just ideas, but also self-improvement and all the aligned interests that we have, what you sacrifice is you sacrifice the factor of geography. You find this amazing group of people, and it turns out that they are literally scattered completely across the world, and it becomes almost impossible to build this kind of. And I've had so many crazy ideas over my years of being on the internet. One of them was, we need to go build a village.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
Like people start like a group chat, and they're like, yeah, we're going to start a village. It's like, you can't start a group chat and think you're going to start a village. Why would, like, we're going to have to get visas, get jobs in the same place. There has to be a business infrastructure. That is insane. But people were really serious about this, I think, to some extent.
No, absolutely.
And that's not the solution, ultimately. Yeah. The solution is people who were raised on the internet and live on the internet still, to some extent, through maybe their jobs, like you, to some extent, and others with their businesses, online coaching, whatever it has to be. Those people have to learn how to actually exist with a scattered geography. Maybe it is doing things in a remote way, with video calls. Maybe it is traveling frequently. Maybe it's being a bit more nomadic, or maybe it is moving to those people, maybe where there are locuses of people. Now, there's always going to be a challenge with finding those places. There's always going to be other limitations. But you also have to balance the people that you've met on Instagram with people in the real life that you've met who aren't maybe on the same wavelength as you. You have to make friends with people who are maybe not as based as you are.
Absolutely.
But what I'm always doing, and this is kind of an answer to the question, I'm always doing this. I'm always looking for people who are genuinely like gems. Like, they are not only based, but they are people you can sit down and have a fantastic conversation with and explore, amazing ideas
Yeah.
with, who will grow you and who will not be afraid to criticize you and to kick you in the right direction, and also who live near you. This is a massive thing that's really difficult to do. And how do you find these people? Well, I found a couple on Instagram. I found a couple through, once again, my sort of social media presences in person, like, friends of friends. I found people through my school and also friends of friends through school, and then university and work. But there's only a few. But what I think the real challenge is once you find good people from lots of circles, it's building them together. And ultimately, what you have to do is you have to be somebody who's magnetizing others towards you. When you find somebody who's great, you have to ask yourself, who would they like in my friend group? Who would they approve of? Could they build their own friendship? Because what you can do is you can, and this is something that I've been very, very serious about in the last couple of years about doing. And thankfully, I live in the southeast of the UK. So I have a pretty good locus of people around London and the sort of counties around it, where you can actually go and meet up every couple of months. And that's so important, in my opinion. And build these friendships around it and have places that you go to where you get people invited. Even if there's maybe one central group, you get a couple of people tacked onto that. And what you do is you just try to, not artificially, but authentically create conversations between those people. So that's one thing. There are other types of people who are not naturally. I am naturally somebody who likes to build networks and put people together. There are other people who are not like that. And that is extremely common. And I would say that many of the people I do this with, who I invite to things, are not people who naturally do all this networking and they're trying to build this huge group of base but good quality people. That is where I would say, if you are not one of those people, you have to find people who are people like that. And you have to be part of their networks. That's just how it is.
You're completely right, yeah.
And that's the next stage, which is like, there are certain people in life who are naturally connectors. There are also people in life who are naturally going to just be focused on their own thing and want to be part of those groups. And you have to go out and find them. And the other issue there is going out and actually going to, it's always institutions. It's a school, or it is a church, or it is a gym. It's never just random. You don't just go out and walk down the street and find people in that way. It's very rare. You're going to find people through a reason. So you have to basically focus on those things.
Yeah, and before I answer the similar question, I would say like communities, but I don't think anyone actually went out to find it. They were just like, oh, okay, gym, church, whatever. They were just like satisfied with the answer. They were still expecting something random to happen, but it just doesn't happen, right? Like I never also had that experience. All the great friends that I have that are actually here, I either met like in a gym, I met either like through like some shared activity, like volunteering. I have one great friend who was even in my group, with the warrior quest and everything like that I met when I was volunteering in the town. So that's how I met some great people, and I completely agree with you there. And I don't think I'm kind of a guy that is very good. I mean, I don't know, I kind of in the middle. Like I don't necessarily like putting people together, but I put myself in those positions that I kind of do it anyways, So, but that's such a great point, because in life, everyone wants to be kind of a leader, a main guy, but just the reality is that those are like just few percent of people, and most people just work better when they are like when they don't have to have the role of like a leader or of making something. Same thing with the modern, way of like creating. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a businessman. Nah, you're much better off finding someone who you can trust and actually just. Well, if you're that kind of a guy, but I'm telling you, most people actually are that kind of a guy. If that was the case, everyone through the history would be their own. Everyone would have their own like house state. If you know what I mean. Like everyone would be like a based Chad, but no, the world works better when people who have natural leadership skills or who develop them actually are in lead. Very simple,
Yeah, and there's another thing, which is that leadership is not necessarily just being a giga chat. Like people who are very successful at what they do and are very focused are not necessarily going to be leaders of men. Many people will just be specialists or be very focused on their thing.
It will attract people.
Yeah, be very interesting people as well. What I'm always looking for is I'm always looking for very interesting people, much more than I'm looking for people who are like on the same wavelength. You know, I actually become really exhausted by people who are like
Yeah.
just based all the time. Like it honestly, it's not that funny. Like there are some good jokes that you can make, and especially if you can go there. You know,
Yeah.
late at night, you're all in like the, you know, we're all just chilling. You can say whatever you want. That is important. But just being extraordinarily based all the time is so shallow.
Yeah.
Basically what it is it's a sign of somebody who has absolutely no personality, who has basically downloaded a software package from 4chan and Twitter and Instagram for like their personality, and they just installed that so that they don't have to actually like be a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, being based and like, you know, yeah, it's one good thing. And having the right ideas about certain things and not being a liberal is great, and I find it valuable. But having a strong, interesting personality is about really knowing about some topics and really being able to listen to people, being able to have good conversations, and also just not being absolutely straightforward as well, not being a complete normie in the sense that you're only interested in like these topics and you check in on everything, but you kind of see things differently. And those people I always love putting together, because those are the people that you put two of those together from any walk of life,
Yeah.
and you will just learn so much from those people. You have this fascinating conversation, and you know, a lot of my life is about that. It's about, you know, it's about pivotal moments in life where you sit down and you talk to somebody and you learn how to change your point of view and move forwards and apply those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for many of my like posts, or not just posts, but just talk real life, like real life realizations. It happened through conversations. Of course, it happens like when I journal or whatever, when I think a lot, but it mostly actually happens through conversations. Because even as you speak with someone, you hear the thoughts come out, and someone responds to that. You can actually create whole new like puzzle pieces come together, which is incredible. That happens like that. And I also want to add just one thing that is very important in like good friendships. Excuse me, I'm gonna die. And that is being actually genuine. Like you cannot have good friendships, good connections, if you are pretending to be someone you're not, or pretending to care about people just so because you find them interesting, or you want them in your circle. Like that's never gonna work out. Even if you literally don't know anything about that guy in terms of like, if you don't have the same level of knowledge or anything like that, maybe that guy would think you're boring, whatever. But if you're just nice, genuine, people will want to be around you, even though you don't have a value. Like if you're genuinely like caring, nice, friendly, smiling, people will remember you by that, and they will not remember you by, oh my god, this guy is so smart in the way he talks about that. That's fine, but if you're asshole and being smart, no one will want to hang out with you. So, and if you're asked how to be genuine, so that you just don't lie, be honest with yourself, and if you think you have bad traits, well, start working on them, and that's how you'll actually find good friends, and not pretending your way through it, or as Thomas said, like downloading a personality and finding people on the same level that just ends up being like a trend. Like you can, it becomes a thing like, oh my god, let's smoke after school, or let's say racist things after school. It literally becomes to that point, like no personality, just a trend, and not good friendships.
Yeah, that's good. I think impact is really important to me as well. People that, like, from my personal experience, when I go out into the world, my goal with my personal relationships with people is to actually have a very strong effect on people that I talk to and know. It's to say things that change people's points of view. And it's, that's something that gives me immense personal satisfaction. But I also, I hate to put myself in a situation where I surround myself with people who I try to impact all the time, but don't have anybody who's really impacting me. Because what ends up happening is you get way too ahead of yourself. And I think I did this when I was when I was like 18, 19, 20, is that before my page essentially, is that I kind of felt like I'd leveled up ahead of everyone. I had all these ideas, and then I was able to teach people, and then I knew so much. And honestly, I knew almost nothing. And
Compared to now,
so much ego. And so what you really need to do is you do need to for your own sake, you have to ask yourself, am I being challenged by the people around me? Or are the people around me just shallow? And I have taken a bit of a serious line on just cutting everybody out who doesn't have a strong effect on me, or I don't find is challenging me in some way. Because if you just surround yourself with these people, it normally happens based on like specific interests as well. If you're interested in one thing and you go to one place with one type of person, and you don't have these people who have multiple things that you're able to do things with, and you're able to sort of have this broader interest and alignment with. If you just those kinds of people, but also normies, like from work and stuff, those kinds of people can just like, unless they just never challenge you. They just never put you in a position where you overthink, because they don't necessarily like to. They live by cliches, and what you end up doing is, if you hear so many cliches from a person, you just end up thinking that they know nothing and they have no value. And that's probably not the case, but you have to find these people who just aggressively want to think about the life more, who will therefore ask you, is that right? Are you sure that's right? Maybe that's wrong. Why don't you think about it this way? And you have to think, that's the kind of person I like to be around, where you don't necessarily just get to put all your views out there as they're facts. Like, I'm obsessed with nutrition. I can talk to like normies about nutrition all day, and I can say the most insane things you've ever heard. And some of them are obviously completely true. Some of them I'm early into researching. I'm not going to tell the person, oh yeah, this is absolutely true, but I'm going to tell them what I've been learning about, and they'll just say, oh, that's interesting. How can you live a life where you're just being told, oh, that's interesting, oh, that's nice, oh my gosh, man. Like, imagine a whole life where you're just told, oh, that's interesting, wow, really, oh my, there would be no point in ever learning anything. So that's why you want to surround yourself with people who are critical and also are learning as much as you are in their own way.
No, absolutely, you're absolutely right. But one thing that happens, and people listen to this, you probably maybe you realize this, maybe you don't, but this is something you need to do. But you will, if you're like normally wired, you will probably have a lot of ego response when someone challenges your beliefs. Everyone wants to be to listen to people. Naturally, want to listen to people who are like, yeah, you're right. That's you're so smart. Great job. We hate people who actually challenge us. If that's like a natural reaction, but that's actually the people that we, like you said, exactly the people we need, because they help us grow. They help us see our own mistakes and humble us, kind of, in a way. I used to hate people, even like in my family, with my relationships. I used to hate when someone was like, but I'm not quite sure that's right, or what about this? I'm like, who are you to question me? I put my time into this, I put my effort, but then I realized, okay, so first of all, I'm very arrogant for no reason at all. My ego is inflated, and I'm never gonna learn something, or at least able to listen to something, if I'm like this. Someone can be 100% wrong, but they can still challenge you and make you think about things. Maybe they can just reassure you that, okay, I'm completely right again, or you can be like, I never thought about it like this. Amazing, I will grow. Because the whole thing with having good friends is there's not necessarily a competition that you're like, I have to be smarter than this guy or else. It's actually about uplifting each other in each part, or rather in the part that person is really good at and you're not good at. Just completing each other. That's a good relation. That's a good friendship. No matter how you look at it, family, wife, husband, or friends, just completing each other, supporting each other. And yeah, like, I'm really telling you from my experience, I used to hate people telling me I'm wrong. And I noticed the pattern that when now people tell me I'm wrong, I want to like kind of be like defensive immediately. But I really noticed that feeling in me, and I'm like, just shut up, Maro, and like just listen to people and think about it, because they oftentimes, especially if it's a trustworthy person you can really trust, like most of the times they actually probably be right, because they see you, what you are portraying. They don't actually see your thoughts, and many times the thoughts are just irrelevant. You just get into delusions.
That is why it's so important to have real friends, because I'd say the biggest difference between somebody who criticizes you and you can listen to them, and somebody who criticizes you and you switch them off, should be that the person you listen to, it's somebody who really has your best interests at heart. and they can disagree with you on with the idea that you are wrong because they want better for you, and not because they think you're wrong because they just are in a different world to you. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who are aligned with you in values, not in beliefs necessarily, but in values. And basically, this is where what we say is the friend-enemy distinction. I think it's like Carl Schmitt, who was like a jurist, a lawyer in the Certain Reich. So not necessarily just super giga-based guy, but actually just a real scholar that is referred to as, a well-respected legal scholar. He basically classed this idea of a friend-enemy distinction, which is when you are friends with somebody and when you are enemies with somebody, the person who's your friend can say whatever they want, and if they say that, you'll listen to them and you'll take them seriously, and you will basically take that on board if it's against you, but you know that you're just trying to get to the truth. And if somebody's your enemy, if they have diametrically opposed values to you, if they are, for example, a degenerate, or they have a weak mind, or if they literally just hate, their life is based on resentment and hatred, then you take nothing they say on board, because let's say they have a criticism of what you're doing, then they're doing it out of personal issues, problems, but also a desire to see you fail. And this is something that, for example, in politics, conservatives are incapable of doing. They believe that essentially, you should have a completely open field in politics, and that all of your enemies should be completely open to destroy you, and you should completely allow them to do it. And what ends up happening is, their opponents end up just hacking that algorithm that they've chosen and destroying the nation over multiple decades. Let's not talk too much about politics, but my point there is when you choose friends, you want to have people who are not only aligned with you in values, but also are smart, so that when they have something to say to you, when they are critical of you, you can really take that on board. I'll give you an example, and maybe the guy who's listening, maybe one of the listeners of the podcast will kind of take this on board. Basically, he was trying to message a girl who really likes. If you're listening, you'll know who you are. He was trying to message a girl who he really likes, and he sent me the texts, and I immediately was like, you're gay, bro.
Yeah.
Because he was basically putting these triple exclamation marks. He was like, sure, we can do that.
Oh my God.
It would be so nice. Oh my God. I would love to do that with you. Oh, it'd be so nice. And smiley face. Oh my gosh, man. He was messaging this girl as though he was a gay best friend. And that's what a lot of men do when they're trying to attract a woman. They think they have this desperation and scarcity mindset where they must speak to the woman in this nice way to guarantee that she responds. And you guarantee a response at the risk of any formation of relationship.
Yeah, well, women, they work like that. Like, they will literally, in the first few, some say an hour, whatever, but they will literally be like, okay, this guy is just like friendly. He's not attractive to me at all.
We can go out for coffee.
And it's so hard for them to switch you into like a potential partner. Because once they categorize you like, oh, he's just a nice guy, they will actually not even, it's so weird that they don't even think about, okay, he's just a nice guy who wants to court me. They're just like, oh, he's just friendly.
Yeah.
He's just gay, whatever.
What's crazy is that a lot of men slither their way, I'll use that word, like a snake.
As you should, yeah.
Slither their way into the close friendship of a woman. And they think it's something completely different. They're going for the coffee.
Yeah.
And they'll think of it as a date, no matter what. And they'll go for even a meal, a restaurant meal, and they'll get photos after, and they'll be together.
Oh my God, yeah.
And she wouldn't even think about posting that on the story. Who takes the photo of her? It's the guy who's taken her out and paid for the meal. But she's like, oh, such a lovely guy. He paid for my meal. What a nice thing. She has basically programmed herself to think of you as a friend. Yep. And the problem is that the man is doing that because he has a survival strategy, basically, rather than as a success strategy, which is to approach the woman and get as close to her and maximize the time he spends with her, but also minimize risk. Because if you put yourself out there and you say something like what you actually want, you risk never talking to that woman again.
Exactly.
So this guy who may even be listening to this. Actually, this has happened twice in the last month with two different guys. And
Oh my God.
So, both may be listening to this podcast, but both send me these text conversations. And, my immediate response to that is to say things that if I were an enemy of that person, they would think are like evil remarks made to them. I said extremely rude and aggressive things to these guys.
Yeah.
Like, you are so dumb for messaging this. And then I literally went to the point of writing messages for them.
Oh my
to
God.
say, this is what you need to be saying. This is how you should say things like this. This is what you should say. And getting angry with those guys. But they, I've put myself, I do feel proud of the people I've put myself around, because those people never get offended at what I've said. They immediately acknowledge and immediately realize what's happening. But that's only because I spent a lot of time thinking about, about masculinity and femininity and the ways that they interact in relationships, so that I'm able to have their best interests at heart when I read a message like that. But that's a great example, in my opinion, of where you become capable of seriously using every emotion in the toolkit. Anger, disgust, rudeness, all of these things, to get the best out of people. And you can't do that if you only have people who are associated with you. If you have a colleague or something like that who says you're so stupid for writing that message, you're not going to take what they say on board, and you're going to think that you're right, and that limits and inhibits your own personal growth as well.
No, absolutely. But just one important thing to say here is that we're talking about people you choose, and we must talk about people you don't choose, and that's family. And that's a completely different way of approaching things, such as those people must still have, because I know people listening to this will be like, but my mom is like, she's completely telling me to do this stuff, and I don't agree with it. What should I do then? You're not gonna cut off your family. So that's something you don't choose, something that you're, I guess, to just the minimal at least. Don't hate them, at least that's the least thing you can do. But optimally what you should do is, okay, again, those people, most of them will have your best interest in heart. Again, they will try to actually help you. It's just that their perspective on you and what you're supposed to do is different, and it is something that you must, basically, if you're a child or if you're a sibling, you must have that respect towards them at all times. You will listen to them, you'll be like, okay, but you don't have to actually do it. That's the minimal thing you have to do, I believe. And you will not cut off someone because in your family because they think differently. You'll just be respectful towards them and move on. So that's, I think, such an important thing to note, that you cannot become this guy who thinks that family is also like a problem. Family is something that you've been given, something that you should be blessed if you have anyone, because you don't want to be that kind of guy that regrets being an asshole, Like, we're just talking now about being genuine towards people, being nice to them, but you're going to be an asshole towards a family member. Like, how does that? It's not aligned. You must be this completely aligned person, And like I said, a lot of times in your family, you will also find the people like we described who literally will kind of be jealous, even like really dislike you. And but then again, it is family, it's not friends. You cannot be like, I'm not going to listen to you. You're going to listen to them because you love them, and at the end of the day, you can always rely on the family. No matter how bad things get, you can always come back home. And it's just something that should not be in this conversation necessarily. It's just something that you need to keep in mind, that, okay, I respect you, I'm going to move on, and that's that. What do you have to say about this?
I think what you said is fascinating, and I think that I would take it in a more normative direction, where it's not necessarily the case that you should or should not listen to your family, but it's that what your family says to you will have an impact on you. It always will, because when somebody has known you for a very long time, what ends up happening is, when let's say you walk up to someone in the street and you're rude to them, that person's going to think you're rude, but they only have one data point. They have the data point of you doing
that interaction. Yeah.
Let's say you walked up to that person 15 times and you were rude to them, right? Yeah, they're going to have more information about you. But imagine that on the scale of every day of your life, someone's known you, and not necessarily every second of your life, because you've done so many other things. but they have pattern recognition. Every human has pattern recognition. And if you go on Wikipedia and you check early life of many people, you get that as well. But when it comes to family, it's like the ultimate early life. Where isn't that a fascinating analogy? You can early life someone on Wikipedia as a family member. And you know exactly what happened in their early life because you were there, right?
Yeah.
You know exactly what they are, who they are in their hearts. You know when somebody has betrayed themselves, has betrayed you. You know if they've grown from that. And one of the things is when you have a friend who has just betrayed you, you have the option to cut them out, and you rarely get that same choice with a family member. And therefore, you have to acknowledge that certain people are capable of long-term change about their characters. Coming back to the point that you just made about listening to what your parents have to say to you, it's not necessarily the case that I can tell you, or even Maro, you can tell somebody, don't listen to them. If your mother says something like you are a betraying person, you're going to believe that. Your parents and your family will always have a deep impact. The dreams that you have, that when you lie asleep at night, you will remember the things that they've told you and what they believe about you and what they think about you. So you can't necessarily do much about that because they do know you, and you should always take what they have on board. I think the next question is whether you can integrate what your family believes about and says to you into a kind of life philosophy that you have about yourself. You might feel pain because of what somebody in your family has said to you. You may also feel great about the way that your family treats you. But whether you allow those feelings that have affected you to be part of the way that you see yourself, you have a choice there, I'd say. That's a definite different thing. And that's where I would say, you can still choose who are the people in my life that are the ones that I open the gate to change my views about the world, and who get to decide what I do with my business or with my professional career or with my relationships. Who are the people that can call me out? That's a massive thing. If somebody stops you and says, hold on, this is a dumb idea, you can either be open or closed to that person. First of all, as we were saying, when you get to choose the person, you can choose for those people to be good quality people who would be trusted to do that. But you can also choose for your family to be people that you would allow to make that decision to criticize you for as well. That's the thing I'd say is important there. I think that, definitely family will have an impact on you.
Yeah.
Whether that family is somebody that you are thinking about every day in terms of the decisions you make is a different thing.
Because plenty of people that you probably know and that I know still live, even if they're like adult now, they still go through their life through lenses of their families. As in, how would my parents think? That's how they live their life, and they end up living lives where they're not even authentically themselves, but they're so traumatized by their family and their opinion that they just don't actually have the ability to think for themselves, which is very sad. Like I know people like 40 years old who still are like little children. It's so sad. Yeah.
I think the only way you can get around that is, when you went to these school trips when you were younger and you all got on the coach, who were the kids that were crying? Who were the kids that were like, I need to see my parents? And
I was the kid.
and that's the thing. You have to ask yourself, like, at what point in my life did I get past that point? When did I say, I'm happy to be away from my parents? And that's about, I think we have very different attitudes here as well. And I think that's a really interesting thing to observe, which is that I'm coming from a country which is way more individualized, way more you run away from your parents.
Yeah, exactly.
You essentially effectively run away from your parents at the age of 18 and you try your best to go over 100 miles away from them if you can. I know many people in my sort of circles who actually lived with their parents and it was very successful because they were able to save up and they were able to run their own business and they had a safety net as well. And that's a fascinating, fantastic thing. And I would say a good strategy. But then, there is also having a strong relationship with your family. And for me, I would say it's exactly that. I have an ability to keep a distance from the things that my family believe about me, but I also have become more mature and learned the ways that my family and my parents, my sibling,
Yeah.
can what they can say about me that keeps me awake and makes me think, and what they can say about me that has no impact on who
Yeah.
I am. You know?
Yeah, maybe a good conclusion here is that you will inevitably be affected by what your family says because it's so deeply ingrained in us to be affected by our family. I mean, so it's someone you literally, especially your parents, you literally looked at them as your savior at the beginning of your life. Just how we are programmed. So you will be faced probably, but um, so it is about how do I put this? So my family, if what I'm doing, I wouldn't do like 90% of the things if it was them asked. Like lifting, no way. Like this is bad for you. You're gonna injure yourself. Being starting a business, being in like a 8 year long relationship. Like everything almost that I'm doing is opposed to them. And I would get so angry about it. And I'm sure that not sure. I know that it's affecting me a bit because I obviously want to make your parents happy, but it is just something that I decide know that it's like okay, okay, mom, you're shouting at me for lifting. Okay, I'm gonna hack her and move on. It is just, I believe, a matter of, like you said, getting past that point where you're not crying because you're away from your family. If you're able to like get to that step, you're kind of detached from that point where you're like an adult. I think it's perfect. You can still listen to it. It'll probably still affect you a bit, but you are mature enough to just keep moving on and doing the right things for you.
And Maro, you're somebody who we've spoken about this, like coming to Croatia for the first time myself and Dubrovnik and seeing this place which is kind of enchanted by the past and has a wonderful history, of industry as well. As you mentioned, shipbuilding and having its own sort of national identity as well as a small country within a nation, a broader nation, and its own elements of a language as well. And then you're somebody who has family who has moved here and genuinely integrated and
Yeah.
built an identity around this place. And if everybody was like your family, I think Dubrovnik would be a lot more Dubrovnik
For sure. Yeah.
than it is today. But then there's also a sense, something that you said to me, in the last couple of days, which was about essentially the ideal of the most of the people here being to own a place and then to kind of sit around.
Yeah.
And that's like the highest form of a culture.
Yeah. Of self-actualization, you're like, yeah, I made it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that may be entwined with the family as well, with the idea of like,
Oh, definitely.
I've reached my highest state of being, which is to exist.
Yeah.
And this comes into a very strong element of your identity, which is to have your coffee in the morning. And
Yeah, which are great parts. Yeah.
there's a beauty of the Adriatic and the Mediterranean view of the world, which is to be able to have a peace with yourself.
We literally call it. There's like a word. It says pomalo, and it's like literally a philosophy of life, which literally just means slowly, like just taking everything slowly. It's really, like I said, enchanting kind of like you really get into that lifestyle of just being more calm and slow. But obviously, that's the ideal. Let's put it like that. Yeah.
And that's part of it, and that's a beautiful thing. And there's also a lack of ambition there.
Yep,
That
exactly.
somebody like you feels, and I know this because I know you. Somebody like you is like diametrically opposed to this idea that like you just accept what you have. You are clearly somebody who really wants to like own your own thing and do it, and not just sit around and have passive income. But have the exact opposite, have active income.
Because it's like if you understand anything of human nature, it is that you will not feel fulfilled if you sit around. Like generally, like working something with your hands, even if it's freaking typing, or even if it's like just doing something, carrying something, building something, it is the core value of human race. That you need to be active, you need to be doing something, or else you'll just perish. You'll just not. It's like you'll be the person who just that something is off. Like I could be with my apartment. I could be with my family, kids here. I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
And that's what actually ends up happening. I mean, some people call it like midlife crisis, and they attribute it to like not experiencing things like I said in the first episode, lift Uplift, not fucking 20 guys. No, but you know what I mean. Like they attribute midlife crisis to not living life, but it's actually just attribute to not living a life like purposefully. Just actually doing something that's valuable, and or at least just building something that is essentially you agree with, you are on the same vibe with, I guess. And not just building it for someone else or someone else's dreams. Like we said about parents or whatever.
I mean, imagine being an architect and, you have a building that you've envisioned in your head, and your job is to build the building. And then you ask, like, is that the job of the architect? Is it to build one building?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it's not to build one building. The job of the architect is to build many buildings. And then you might envision, what is the city that the architect would envision? What does that look like? And then you might say, oh, well, that city looks like this. It looks like, I don't know, New York or whatever city it may be. Maybe it would look like Dubrovnik, to be more relevant. Yeah. And then you say, okay, what is it about the city that would be done and complete and finished? It's like in, kind of, you can even take this like a Minecraft analogy. Like you build your house and then you built it, and then you're like, well, ultimately, right, in this house, I'm using a crafting table and a furnace, which I could have done within 5 minutes of starting the game. So why have I built the house?
Yeah.
And that's kind of life, isn't it? But life occurs in the process of doing that thing. It occurs in the process of building the city. And it's also the fact that the city will never actually be built. There will never be the architect that gets the job of building the whole city. The architect will be in a complex adaptive system of many other architects building with their own vision. And so the architect wins by crafting such a clear vision that it wins out over the other architects. It's clear. And that's where humanity kind of comes in. It's at the ideal of conquest. And that's what, in my opinion, life is. It's about being somewhere. It's about having a trajectory. And I think that a person is their trajectory, if you see what I mean. Where are you going now? And that is what you are now. If you are genuinely going somewhere, then you are there in that sense. But you can obviously, if you stopped going there, then you would not be there. So that's why the trajectory is all that ever really exists.
Yeah, because you can that's what the folks who are talking about manifestation, even though that's satanistic, that they get one point right. That is, what is the person you want to become actually doing daily, the little things. What is he doing? If you can do those things right now, you will probably eventually get to become the person. It's very true, because it's all based on, like you said, trajectory, doing the right things, and you will get there. So it is, you can really view it from a simple point of view.
And it's manifestation is, in my opinion, some idea, but there is a true thing there, which is not a religious concept.
Yeah.
It is just a concept of life, which is that if you desire something and you work towards it, then you become capable of achieving that thing. And you don't become capable of achieving something that you're not working towards.
Yeah.
But I'd say the limitation of something like a manifestation is that it tends to be insipidly materialistic. It's like, I will have this amount of money, rather than the effect of the money. What would I do with that money? I would achieve these goals. And those goals have to be intricate. They have to be aesthetic as well. They have to be around the way that you seek to see the world. And once you build a series of goals around the world that you want to see, that doesn't necessarily have to be, I want to change the world in this way. It could be, I want to create a place for myself and my family, which looks like how I would like the world to be. That's another goal. But when you start thinking about those goals and you have them in mind and you work towards them, you are in a trajectory. But that is ultimately it. Are your goals to have just a single property, a wife, 2 kids, and a dog, and then you are done? Because in that sense, if that is your goal, then you are already sitting on your ass. You are already there in your house and sitting on, having your wife and your dog. and that is ultimately that is your life. So you have to ask, like, are your goals more ambitious than that? And are they intricate? Are they unique?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the point I was sort of getting to with that is clearly you have goals which are individualized to yourself, which are ambitious within a city that you find to be not always on that same wavelength.
Yeah.
And therefore what you're doing is, I think, very much in the tradition of this city, Dubrovnik, which is to be entrepreneurial, to seek a global audience as well. The people of Dubrovnik were shipbuilders, as you said, who built ships not just for Dubrovnik, but for many Mediterranean major states. And therefore they had this view of Europe, which was much more supercontinental or supracontinental than just themselves. And you're clearly somebody who has that same vision of the world. And so I'd say, like, how does that interact? I'd ask, how does that interact with your, like, basically with your family, if that's not too personal of a question for this?
So how does it interact? Well, my family, is from Yugoslavia area.
Yeah.
So obviously the peak of achievement was you have to finish university and get a job at like a state job or something like that, where you have the most stable income at the job you can work until pension and retire like that. That's the dream life. That's the dream job.
The dream life is to
Exactly.
die.
And yeah, at the beginning of where I started just thinking differently, doing different things, there was tons of resistance, and not just like little like probing or like I don't like doing that. It was like you're a freaking failure. Like you're not doing something right. You need to get a job, and even putting down like he's finding himself. Like they would talk on the phone. He's going to this phase right now. And I'm literally like lifting and trying to build business, and he's just going through the phase. And but he'll find a job. He'll get to college, whatever. Like it was really like mental fucking. Like that's the best way to put it.
There's a fascinating point in there.
Yeah. You can say it immediately.
There's a fascinating idea there, which is that when your family talks about you, what do they want to say to their friends? Fascinating.
Yeah, I know.
You never think about that, actually. If you've done something, if you've made a decision about your business or about college or university, and your parents aren't happy with it, that's one thing. But there's also, what would your parents say to their friends when they're having a gossip conversation?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something that's can be extremely. I mean, it must have been extremely painful to hear. Like, even though it's your decision and that you're proud of that decision, it must be very difficult.
Yeah, no, it was very annoying. Like I would really get upset by it. I would really get emotional about it because, I mean, looking at those things, like I thought it was like a small town thing, but it's actually just a global thing where everyone is like they want their son, they want their daughter, so they can brag about them. She finished medical school. She's a doctor now, and then this guy comes. Oh, my son has a freaking yacht. That's what they want to. They just want to compete with each other, which is such a shallow thing.
My daughter also has 2 doctorates. Well, mine has 3 actually.
Yeah. And they saved the full hospital of dying children.
Yeah, I killed the whole fucking hospital.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So that was a thing.
We need to do the opposite, where we're like, my son has murdered 14
literally, and I'm like that, and I'm like that, man. Like I will. That's why I really reject my way of talking. Really, sometimes is like pushes off other people because I notice that they want to be like that traditional way of talking, and I will literally be like that. Like I also killed someone. They'll be like, oh. Because they want to start doing that like cock measuring thing, whatever. I hate it. I hate all of that. Like I love tradition, but I hate small-mindedness. Like I hate the small town way of living, and which is obviously, like we said, present everywhere. So like, anyway,
just a small town way of living. It is the fact that when people have relationships with each other and they grow up, their life is no longer interesting enough because of the path that they've chosen, which is essentially to be an employee of a business in perpetuity, and to really have minimal identity by that. That people, I think, past the age of around 35 can often just become textbook consumers in that extreme sense, where their whole life is like, which type of house would you like? which brand of car would you like? And, then when you drive that car, you get to say that you drive that car to other people.
Yeah.
And the other people say, that person has chosen that level of life. And all of life just becomes this, basically ladder. And then you have, obviously, you do want success, but what you want for your children is you want success, which is not measured in some kind of quantifiable rung ladder.
Yeah.
It's measurable by genuine achievement in the world.
Yeah.
And it's, that's where this kind of order picking, I guess like life ordering kind of way of measuring the world via your son and daughter's university achievements, it just becomes so frivolous. As somebody who did graduate with a good grade in university, but I intentionally chose a topic which was not, philosophy,
exactly.
Which was not employable because I actually aggressively wanted to do something with my life which wasn't just conventional. I wanted to work it out for myself as I went along to some extent. And I think my parents were very open to that, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
But also, I think with my personal goals as well, I've always been that person that maybe I wasn't going to pursue academia forever and be extremely conventional in my job duty, but I am going to be very successful. And I think that's the same with you. You are somebody that will run a business, and I already know just based on seeing it in the last couple of days. And based on knowing you, I know that you're going to grow this business and become far more successful in terms of what your parents will say about you in 10 years. The issue is that you have to go through this journey.
Yes,
you have to.
It is necessary part of the journey. Absolutely. But the good thing is so that's what goes to the point where I was saying about not necessarily listening to your parents, but again, like I said, I will get emotional, I will get upset, but I will still keep going. And again, it is they are telling, because they grew up in a certain era. They obviously have the best interest, and they really just want you to succeed. That's why I was not getting upset as I was before. When I was doing normal stuff. Even when I was doing normal stuff, they're like, you need to go to college. You're just a waiter now. So it was always something, like that. But as I put my work into it, as I actually got clients, as I got people, as I expand the business, slowly but surely, what happened was he has this thing, it's going well, he's doing good. And that's what the phone calls were because I actually built something. They saw how determined I was, and they saw I was doing good, and then they were like, okay, now I accept it. So in a way, it can be a really motivating thing when you have that kind of opposition.
Denial.
Exactly. But if you start doing it because of that, then I don't think you'll be as fulfilled,
Especially if you become resentful that you were denied.
Exactly. And I could be like, you weren't there when I started, when I was doing this. And I know many people like that. I know family members that are like that. That's what I was telling you. I don't want to make their mistakes. I see their mistakes, and I just accept it. That's normal thing, my friends. You will face resistance. People will be they will literally put down your efforts. I guess that's just the way it should be. If your parents or your people around you are supportive, be very grateful for that. Because I believe most people will experience a way, just as I experienced it, where it's lot of resistance until you get there. And even if you fail, even if you're a young guy, listen to this, even if you fail, at least you're very young probably, and you can fail 10 more times, which is completely fine. You can be wrong, but that spirit, you must not allow it to be shut down just because you fail if one business or two businesses, because that spirit is the core what we're talking about, of actually wanting to build something that has a profound impact on you, on the world, and will be the actual achievement. Okay, you have a freaking bakery, but that is your bakery. You put all of your effort into making the best bread, selling it to local people. It is much bigger achievement than just saying, okay, I finished this, I have this, and I have this beautiful car or whatever. Just your own effort. Again, we're not necessarily talking about everyone has to be an entrepreneur, but if your wish is to literally just work for Elon Musk, and that is your goal, and you pursue it, everyone tells you not to do it, it's your goal. That's it. Yeah, it's just I received a lot of resistance like that, but the way I think about the way my goals are, and I think is such a good gateway to or segue to topic is that balancing of being content and having a lot of ambition, because I feel like we could really have a good discussion about.
I'll just footnote what you said.
Yeah.
Because I want to kind of wrap that conversation up with a point
Mhm.
about professional. With my job, I sort of think about this a lot, which we can go into another time. But essentially, my personal take on that is that not everyone will be an entrepreneur. I'm probably I will become an entrepreneur at some point. But I'm in essentially a sales job, and talking to customers every day and approaching people and calling them and having to sell to them, and doing so much around the professional world is a very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Also, the role I have is based around commission. And one thing I've really learned from that is that ultimately, yes, you don't have to be an entrepreneur, but you do have to be entrepreneurial
In mindset,
And what I've seen a lot of the time is many people in our spheres, and I'm sorry if I'm calling you out here if you're listening, just get a job where they just tuck themselves away into the corner of a company and just exist, and they become stagnated in their salary and personal growth from their job, but they also become incapable of receiving, for example, bonuses because they're not recognized for what they've actually done. And that's because they're not. When you actually look at the top line revenue growth of a business, you're not seeing that person. Maybe that person does something which is super niche and like behind 5 layers, and it's like, it becomes this like, you don't even know what you do in the world.
Yeah.
And when you are somebody who is a value creator,
I have to stop. I have to take a piss. I'm going to burst.
So what I was talking about is profession. When you put yourself multiple layers behind the front end of a business, into some kind of infrastructure or some kind of extremely niche operational role, you eventually get to the point where you have absolutely you cannot in one sentence say how your job is contributing to the top line growth of that business and success of that business. And what is extremely important in a professional career is finding a way to get yourself to the front. And the problem is that being at the front of the business, being near the revenue of the business, like you are, ultimately, you are at the front end of a business. And because you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But people who are non-entrepreneurs, who are employees, if they get themselves to the back of the business, where what they're doing is they're fixing systems that other people deal with, and those people help other people at the front end of the business. You become that's where people say stuff like cog in the machine, or rat race. That's where people say that because you become unexposed to growth in that way, and you don't get thought about by leaders of the business. When you get to the front end of a business, and that could be in the form of sales, it could even be in the form of working directly with customers, and being extremely attentive to customers in some way. When you're within those roles, you are going to become so much more entrepreneurial, and you're going to understand the vision of the business. You're going to have measurable successes in your career that you've achieved, which will give you personally much more growth. They will enhance your communication. They will enhance your ability to say, I've done this, this, and this. And if you do go and start your own business someday, you're going to understand so much more about how a business grows, because ultimately sales and customers are the heart of a business. So understanding them is the way to succeed. So yeah, that's my personal belief on that side.
Yes, and such a good point.
Is that your ultimate destiny in professional, it must be to be entrepreneurial. It must be. Otherwise, you will ultimately just get trodden on.
Yeah,
you'll be affected rather than effective.
No, exactly what we talk about, the people who the previous system where they would just do the same job, wait till pension. They are actually not happy about doing so because everyone wants to advance in life, And even if you're literally just doing like the most non-entrepreneurial job, having the mindset of entrepreneur will transform the whole job, because you're looking at your little job as like a way, okay, how can I increase this? How can I get this better? I guess what you're saying is there's no other way to work except literally like looking at the lens of building and not being like a slave consumer, or not a consumer, but slave, like just you're completely unaware of slave. Full stop. Like completely unaware of the trajectory of the business and your role in it. Like, I think, absolute great point to add to the conversation.
Yeah. So you were going to change the topic.
Yeah, what I was saying is we were having a good discussion before the podcast started recording about the line between being like content and being happy with what you have, like appreciating everything, like your town or little things, or how forceful it can be actually to do that. And in general, like what is the line between being so ambitious, wanting to build something, and just being happy with it? And we touched upon material things, for example, like how people attribute success to material things, getting that. I feel like that's such a good point to realize that that is not the definition of being ambitious at all, but rather what we said. So let's talk a bit about it, like because I come from more of a perspective, especially like you mentioned, because I live here. In general, my way of living is, like I said, since I became especially more Christian and everything, I really just started cherishing the simple things in life, and not necessarily wanting to make the most money in life, just wanting to expand my heart, my love towards everyone. That's like my goals. You see, someone could say is like very ambitious, maybe even more ambitious in this world to be like full of love and not full of hate. But I just feel like it's a very different way of visualizing what success means to someone. Because I mean, even before I was Christian, I guess I was always talking about being grateful, like remembering the small things. But what you were saying is more like, okay, but those small things can get. I want more. Why would not? Why would I be content with just what I have? You obviously expanded on that, but yeah, let's talk about it now. Like, what's your take?
Yeah. I want to give an analogy, and it's an analogy which is maybe a short story which you can imagine. I don't know if it's the case, but think about like some kind of mountain in Japan. And in that mountain in Japan, there's like a tea farm, and the tea farmer will brew this. He'll grow the same sencha, almost exactly the same every year. And his goal, as is very often the case in Japan, is to create this ultimately standardized, completely perfect product, which
the
is
best possible. Yeah.
Even with plants which change over time, is to create the same thing. And you can imagine that Japanese tea farmer, right? He wakes up and in the morning, he has his tea. He drinks tea, and he has the most amazing sencha, and like he is ultimately grateful at this beautiful thing, and it is something that he would never question that he needs some other sencha. But as a consumer, when you go to a tea shop in Japan or whatever it is, you will be bombarded with this farmer's sencha and then 50 other farmers' best, most beautiful, most incredible senchas. And they're all going to have their own individual character. One might be more vegetal and one might be more umami, one will be more fruity or something. And they're going to taste different, and they're all going to have beautiful elements of them, which give these farmers purpose. But those farmers have all chosen their sencha as the sencha, right? And it's the same with so many things where you are content with what you have, and you do not have this ultimate aggressive ambition to conquer. But there's something in the European mind which is rarely happy with just having what you have, which is why we have this consumerism, because that consumerism is to some extent an outward representation of the desire for variety, for new things, for different things. But it's also colonialism. It is the desire to not just rule other people, but to import spices from across the world, to taste new things, to this place in the desert that we own is amazing. But what if we owned a place in the jungle as well?
Yeah.
And that is an essentially European mindset. It is an essentially European character to expand. And it was the same with the architect story, by the way. The architect is in a trajectory towards something greater. The Roman Empire was growing until they built the walls. And when they built the walls, the identity of Rome was no longer to expand, it was to defend. And that change in identity, to be happy with what they had, the extent of their lands, to be happy with those, that was a switch which occurred, which to some extent may have decayed their identity. Expansion as an idea, and I'm not saying that consumerism is based.
No.
I'm saying that consumerism is kind of a low material outward representation of this desire to experience.
All right, but my question would then be like, how do you think that the European mindset of conquest and expansion goes together with Christianity, because a lot of people will say, well, Christianity is actually the European religion. That's what pushed everything to expand to science. Everything was kind of based around Christianity throughout European history, and that's how it expanded. But how does it go together in the terms of values? Because to me, it seems quite the opposite. Of obviously, we need to expand Christianity. We need to do all these things, but it's not like, oh, what if we had the land there? It was like, what if we sent a missionary there to spread the word of Christ? What do you think? How do they go together? Because obviously, I can have that feeling, that urge for conquest, but is it actually the urge that I need to pursue instead of just putting myself more closer to God and praying more just for other things? Like, what is your take on that?
It's honestly what you've touched on there is probably the most complicated question in the right-wing circles and the reactionary and self-improvement and
That's pretty go.
the whole world of where we inhabit, which is this question of Christianity and Europeanism. And I've always been a dualist in this sense, like dualist in the sense that I am a total believer in Christianity and a total believer in being a European and being expansive and being like totalistic in my worldview, and not ever apologizing, not ever wanting to apologize for the things that my people have done, because I believe that apology to people who are the victims or consider themselves victims is a neutering of yourself. My personal take is that essentially every people in the world have a character, and that is a unique character that is theirs. And the European, this is going to be a big turn from self-improvement and family to something very different. The European character is a shepherd, as a steward of the world. It is to create order where there is human waste and human sewage. It is to govern and create structure for lower people. And it is to allow those lower people to have a world which is something they can exist within without just existing within their own sewage and waste and trash. That is the European way. It is a steward that cleans the world. And that is my personal belief about who we are.
Yes, but look at this. There was never a point of history where that noble message got corrupted by trying to make this the most amount of profit. The expansion inevitably happened because, okay, great, colonize, great. We will take something from there to expand our economy, to grow ourselves at the end of the day, and not necessarily to make the place better. It always came from reasons of greed, and not like, okay, we're going to expand here to, like, for example, share the message of Christ. Like, we want to make this place Christian, we want to make it peaceful, we want to share love into this position. Because I would completely agree with like that notion of conquest, but in a what way? Because every time it ends up being greedy, I believe. Every time it ends up being something earthly and something wanting to possess something instead of wanting to spread something. It's more of possession, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So that's my issue with that. That's my issue with how it ends up always corrupting. It can be very noble in its core, but people corrupt that energy, I guess.
So fundamentally, I believe that our people and what they've done in the past is that they are the only people who can be trusted with these powers. And they can be trusted to be honest with these powers. Wherever you go in the world, when you have people of the European continent, you create societies which are more trustworthy, which are more capable of being successfully Christian, which have peace within themselves. Not necessarily externally, there will always be war. No matter what civilization is in charge of war, there will always be war. But internal peace, European places do not have the crime that we see in the rest of the world. You can have, in England, if you go to the countryside, you walk down the street and you find these shops that have nobody there, and it's based on trust. You just pick up an apple or an egg or a box of eggs and you put the money in that's requested. And that is impossible when you import people from the rest of the world, because those people are not biologically wired to exist within that system. They
Right.
see something that could be taken for free, and it is free to them. And so my take in response to what you said is that it is a question of the people, and those people may be motivated by personal gain. But what I find beautiful about the European people is that their personal gain is
Net gain, yeah.
it is not a zero sum game, and we are not people who steal. Often we are people who exchange, and even you can even go. This is very controversial what I'm saying right now. People who don't steal, people might be saying in the audience, "What the hell are you talking about? They don't steal. You've stolen this and this and this. What about the marbles?" I'm saying we instead of just pillaging and taking, we create infrastructure for places. We create systems that function for those people so that they can exist and succeed within those places.
Yeah.
And I'll just add that we also create the foundation in our society for a Christian state and civilization. And the places today that are becoming more Christian in the world have European infrastructure underneath them, or at least a structure, a technology basis that is European.
So you're saying that, like, combining the story of the Roman Empire, stuff like that, like, the only defense to, like, the evil getting into us is not to stay, but to expand. That's the only way, like, we can stay relevant and spread the message of Christ. There's no, like, staying. It's either be attacked or you bring those people in, or we bring our people there and expand. So I guess that's kind of your response to summarize it, like.
So when you get, there's a famous roller coaster in London called Stealth, and it's basically imagine a horseshoe, right? And the horseshoe is very sharp at the top. So it's like, you go to the top and then you get to the top, and what happens is it's slowed down because it's basically shot itself, and it's got to the top, and then it speeds up when it goes over. Now there's a point at the top of a horseshoe where you can either go forwards, and this roller coaster has very famously rolled back, where it goes up and it doesn't quite get to the top because it's just enough energy, because there's strong wind on that day. And it actually, obviously the roller coaster is engineered to go back, but essentially it will roll back because there is as much reason, when you get to a certain balanced point, there is as much reason that a roller coaster or anything would have inertia to go forwards as it would to go backwards. And that is a heavy, intensive, serious global empire or civilization at its maximum. When a global empire reaches its max, this is so based, by the way, this is based, this is a good podcast. When a global empire reaches its maximum, its fullest state, and it is no longer aggressively expanding because it is worried and anxious about what would happen, it either explodes or it contracts, implodes. It will slow down. So it must either go up and continue growing, or it must shrink. And all of history is not about this empire winning forever. It is about today in 887 AD, we must expand, and we must do this, and we must be in flux, because all of history is this, this is succeeding and this is failing, and it's this patchwork of life and civilizations. And the actual process of those wars and that growth and contraction happening is the history. And that is why you are always in the same way that everybody is in a trajectory, civilizations are always in a trajectory too. And the rate of growth of the civilization, it's not about size of a civilization anymore, by the way. It's not about your geographical borders. It's not the case that borders will change anymore. It's actually about technology. It's about adaptation and adoption of technology to become successful as a civilization, and integrating that technology in a way that is healthy for your people. If you're capable of doing that, you will be the most successful civilization. And that is the modern, and the trade and all these things, but that is the modern form of civilizationalism that we exist in today. And the point there is that I would never apologize for European colonialism, because European colonialism was the best form. because all civilizations are colonial. All civilizations are in flux. They are all trying to grow. They are all trying to dominate their worldview. And that our worldview, though it is not all good, the people who are bad within it are accountable to our Christianity and to our beliefs about morality, which we can hold them to account to.
Yeah, but so maybe this is more of a philosophical question, but
And that's great.
can you win without doing certain little like bad things to begin with? Like, can you push for Christianity, push good values without having to do bad things? Like, what do you think about that?
So I would say
Because Jesus didn't do literally nothing bad,
nothing bad.
literally nothing bad. So that, and we are supposed to follow in His image. How do we go about that?
I mean, humans, men are men, ultimately. And there will be always Christians within civilizations who guide us to make the right decisions at times. But, you have to understand that most of colonialism was not, we are going to take over this land and that's it. It is, we have become trading with this land. And there are some factions within this land who really, really aspire to be like us. And there are other factions who intensely dislike us. Maybe it's because they are of a different religion. Maybe it's because they practice cannibalism, for example, in South America.
Yeah.
Sorry, not South America, in the Polynesia.
Yeah.
In the case of South America and the Aztec and Central America, the cultural practices were around beheadings and basically satanic rituals.
Yeah.
And there, if you read the history of the New World, and especially South America and Central America, the process of colonization was not just, we are going to go to war and capture this nation, this continent. It was actually incredibly complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And, by the way, the greatest success of Christianity in the last 500 years was South America. It was South America, and I'm a Catholic, so I'm somewhat biased there, but it was a biological human change for the entire continent to become biologically Christian. Essentially, that's what I'm saying, is that, there was disease, which is, of course, a terrible thing, the disease that killed so many of the people, but that's nothing to do with our accountability. These diseases happen because of continental, basically thousands and thousands of years of human separation across an ocean being, revitalized. But there's also the actual pagan religions of those nations telling them that we were destined to conquer them and essentially to go to war with them, and them acting upon that and attacking us as well. And so this is what we see in history, is not just Christianity. It's not just like easy Christian decisions of like, you do this and then there's no war. We're talking about people, we are doing trade with a nation, and that nation, many people within it are favorable to us, and other people want to conquer us and kill us, and we have to make decisions. And those things are not necessarily. You can every general will have his own conscience, in his own faith, but he also has a job, and the question is whether his job is inspired by that faith.
Yeah.
And I think for many generals, you could probably ask them, what are you accountable to God? And I think many would say yes. And that's something that's very complicated, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, so I could be stupid saying this, like I could be like just delusional, but what would you think if, okay, history has says so much about how the way it works about expansion and so on, but what if that's the whole problem and constant downfall of civilization is because no one actually purely did Christianity as a way forward, but still mixed it with this, either like the spirit of expansion. They constantly went and tried to adding human things. There is, from my knowledge, there is no one in history who literally tried full-on expansion without any way of mixing. Okay, in terms of violence, in terms of like that. What if the actual key to success is to be 100% Christian and not mix any of those things? I don't think anyone has been able to go to that peak of society where we are able to all be literally loving, literally. Imagine the horde of thousands of people being with Holy Spirit enlightened, and coming to like to people will fall on their knees. Those like minorities, whatever, they'll literally be, oh my god, like if it was such a mass of people. So maybe I don't know, we're literally talking philosophy now, but I believe that the reason why the societies keep falling is not necessarily, it is what you said, but I feel like it is never purely Christian, and I feel like we're in this constant loop, and that's why we keep failing, because we never actually realize, fuck using our earthly minds. It is literally just committing ourselves 100% to God to finally reach the pinnacle of this civilization, to finally reach heaven on earth. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it will never happen. Maybe it will happen 1,000 years in the future. Maybe they will clip this, on their holograms.
Yeah, like, bro, Maro predicted this in 2025.
Yeah.
The third.
Oh my god.
Yes, I agree with you. But I do think that
It's impossible, probably. Yeah.
politics and religion are separated, and the only thing that you can do is you can have religion be an envoy for politics, to be within it and to push it. And that's where I would say that religiously inspired civilizations and states, for example, most of Europe in 500, 600 AD, which was doing, as we are saying, doing this colonialism, 700.
Colonials.
Yeah, so many of the states in the 1600s, 1500s, 1700s, whatever it happens to be, those states were literally built upon Christian foundations. They had political structures which were fundamentally Christian, and they had deep relationships with the church, which guided their decision making. And they sent, for example, in South America, they sent countless missionaries to convert those people. And it is exactly as you described, where so many tribes basically became Christian on their knees. And you know what happened? Is pagan people within those nations saw that their people were being converted.
Yeah, and they killed them. Yeah,
killed massive. There's a great film, I forgot what it's called. It's made in the 80s, but it's quite good, about a Portuguese and a Spanish border, where basically there's a sort of missionary. It might be called The Mission, actually. And it's about basically a Portuguese missionary who's basically converted a tribe, and he's basically being attacked by the Spanish, and basically because they want to enslave them.
All right.
And it's basically a Christian film about basically about law and politics and how these things interact. The short of it is that a society which is actually basically in these colonial situations, real missionary work has been done in the past, real Christian evangelism, and real Christian, I guess you could say, colonialism, in the sense that you are, in a pure Christian sense, doing it, can create reactive forces from non-Christians.
Yeah.
And then that's where, what do? Do you run away?
Yeah.
Do you die? Well, no, you defend them.
You defend them.
And that is...
I absolutely agree with, and that's completely okay with
I
me.
came not in peace, but with a sword. I believe that defending Christians is a good thing to do. And
yeah, I agree with you completely.
And that's where these things can get extremely complicated, because so much colonialism happened as a result
of defense.
Defense and then attack.
I mean, they say crusades are pretty much a defense against. They overtook the holy city and everything. It was kind of defense move at first, So in that sense, you could say it was like based for the first crusade or whatever, But that's the thing. You start with defending, and then as soon as the killing is happening, you start to rationalize killing more than needed, So I feel like there's like this very obviously so complicated topics. We're talking about this as if it's a game, but it's actually real life, realest things possible. But it is, I believe, like expand, defend, and never necessarily attack directly with the army, because you're losing the real message, I guess.
I don't know many situations in European history where, I don't even know if there are more than a few, where Europeans came to a place. I think this probably happened in late colonialism, and I won't like take that as accountable. Maybe in like the Middle East in like the 1900s and the 1800s, where it was like the scramble for these nations, where it was just, okay, take this land. It was much more complicated than that. And it was really fundamentally based around Christianity as well. A lot of colonialism really was. It was based around, converting the natives and bringing them towards the truth. and then it became, like those nations have, like for example, the Mughal Empire in India was Islamic, and in that case, it was correct to try to take that, to try to basically reduce their influence in the nation, and to, very little, by the way, war happened in India in that time with the Mughals. It was much more based around trade and economics, and basically superseding their nation and creating an infrastructure above the nation that governed it, and didn't necessarily just forcefully try to change their religion, but gave a good infrastructure for missionaries to be able to achieve these goals, and to essentially culturally transition those nations from what they are even today, as you can see, now that they govern themselves again, the most disgusting, like,
Oh my gosh.
like fecal matter holes in the world.
Yeah.
Back in 1945, the population of the subcontinent of India was 250 million. And today, the population of the subcontinent, so I'm not just saying India, I'm saying Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. That subcontinent's population today is almost 2 trillion. Sorry, 2 billion. Sorry, I mean, 2 trillion would be, to be honest, I wouldn't even be surprised if you told me it's 2 trillion. So many trillions must die. It is 2 billion, almost 2 billion. It's coming on there. It's probably around 1.8 billion. So we're talking about, in about 70, 80 years, we're talking 80 years now, yeah. We are talking about an absolutely insane multiplication of human mass with almost, and then you go to, let's say you go to India, the same train lines are there in the same place as they were 80 years ago. And the only thing that has changed is that there are more huts, there are more humans, and because of grain and agriculture technology, the human biomass has increased. But the human, honestly, and this is coming from somebody who is as based as anyone, like that subcontinent of India in 1940 would have been so much better. The people would have been so much better. You would not have hated them if you'd have seen them on Instagram doing street food, because that would not have happened in the same way. The hygiene would have been better. Not just because of the British, by the way, it's because of the population being just cleaner and more governed and more within that infrastructure of a European civilization. And that is what we do. We create this infrastructure when we actually hold places within our own. And this is something that America has failed at. By the way, when I say European, I am talking about the European empires. The American way is to completely leave the nation to govern itself and actually aggressively push for democracy, so that the nation can govern itself, even supplant European colonies, which was the strategy of America during the Cold War, which was actually to out-socialist and out-liberal the communists by basically pushing capitalist democracy on nations which were previously colonial, build groups within those nations, for example, in Sub-Saharan Africa and South America and Southeast Asia, was to push for these nations to basically revolt against their European masters and build their own independent nations, but then basically supplant industry and basically buy up their national assets and have people who are friends who will basically sell those things to America for a discount. So America's entire strategy was an economic strategy, not a philosophical and national strategy around improving the world. The idea for America was that democracy was the god, and the democracy itself and giving these people their own self-governance would create the same infrastructure, the same beauty and same flourishing that European governance of those nations achieved. But of course, that was never going to be the case. And it's failed and failed and failed. And you look at these nations now, and the only ones that are successful are the ones that are much more within the European yoke. For example, South Africa, compared to Zimbabwe or Rhodesia. South Africa basically became independent in the 90s. Much later than Rhodesia. And Rhodesia, about in the sort of 86, became independent, but by a civil war by Robert Mugabe. Rhodesia was the breadbasket of Africa. It was the most bountiful agricultural nation. You watch the drill of the native Zimbabweans or Rhodesians at the time, and their military prowess was outmatched This nation was an absolute gemstone in Africa, like literally a first world nation, even for the native people of South Africa, of Rhodesia.
Yeah.
It was they were wealthier than anyone in Africa. They were wealthier than Africans in America, African Americans. They had the highest standard of living of any Africans in the world. And this civil war destroyed their connection with Britain and their nationhood. And it accelerated this decline for them. And they are now one of the most impoverished nations in Africa. Decades of communism, essentially, destroying the farms, capturing them, stealing the assets. Now, South Africa decolonized much less aggressively. I'm not saying it's a good case because it's still a failure. It's a complete failure today. But it is in a better standard because it has more European infrastructure.
Yeah.
There wasn't this driving out of the Europeans. And so you're just looking at two nations which have totally different stories. Botswana, and I don't want to go on about South Africa too much, but Botswana didn't have this revolution and is a highly successful South African nation that basically never did a revolution and kept a good peaceful relationship with its people. So what I'm saying here is a fundamental belief that I have, which is that it is the humans, it is the biology which creates the society, the culture. That culture is the software and the biology is the hardware. And the software of good quality people is capable of creating a structure in civilization which Christianity can be built upon and therefore can feed into the biology. You must have biology lead that whole thing. And that is where Europeans must be uniquely entrusted with governance of the world. That's my worldview, essentially, when it comes to the world.
I understand you completely, yeah.
And I'm 100% Christian. I believe that everything that the Bible says, and I believe that Jesus is a savior, without a doubt. And I believe that, when I live in a European nation and I go around, I see Christianity everywhere in our buildings, and I see it ingrained in our biology, and I see us isolated and distanced from it and lost because we don't have a purpose as a civilization anymore. And what we become is, I actually wrote about this in my university, basically about the buildings of the past that we preserve. Basically being, I talked about Notre Dame and how when Notre Dame was burning down, it reminded the people of Paris that they had a history, a connection in these buildings to people from almost 1,000 years ago, 1100, 1300 AD, who were building these things. Masters, art craftsmen who were more religious than you could ever be. And they did that by building and having an identity. And, in the case of, for example, Florence and the Duomo, that took hundreds of years. And the people who built the foundations of that building died 150, 200 years before it was completed, with total faith, complete faith that it was the right thing to do and that it was a manifest, that this would create something greater. And Europeans are capable of that.
Yeah. So I think, honestly, since we're getting 2 hours long now, I think this is just a beautiful point to end. Honestly, we can talk, we can again record a second. It's just how it's supposed to be, I guess, with us. But I believe that's such a beautiful point to end it, that, Christian life expressed in beautiful way of building, expanding, and just making this place look like heaven, pretty much, in every aspect, cultural, food-wise, literally everything. I think that's such a good way you can combine everything we talked about, in terms of your business way, the way you act in the business, having that, I guess, beauty in mind. I guess it's having that aspect of creating something that's going to serve the world in total, Literally everything we talked about can be put in that image. So
I believe we can create, and we were talking about this as well, create a heaven on earth.
Yeah.
It won't be heaven, but we should.
It will look like, yeah.
We should seek to reflect heaven on earth, and we have people who are capable of doing that. And those people have been displaced in civilization, and that is why we have so much ugliness at the head of our societies and civilizations. It's because we've given the power to those corrupted souls, and those people can be saved. but they have to be saved by new leadership. But yeah, no, fascinating podcast and listening and conversation here.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
Really good topics as well. I like how we flowed there. So
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah,
Powerful, right?
absolutely.
That was, that was